Welcome and thank you for joining us today for AI and DevOps, transforming the developer experience and expanding the security parameter. My name is Raleigh Gould and I will be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Dan Twing, President and COO from Enterprise Management Associates, and Pete Goldin, Publisher and Editor of APMdigest and DEVOPSdigest. Dan joined EMA in 2005 and has over 25 years of experience in information systems, software development, and technology outsourcing. He focuses on all aspects of intelligent and automated management of IT. Pete has served as editor and publisher of APMdigest for 15 years and has over 25 years of experience writing about IT for companies such as IBM, Oracle, and Salesforce. And before I hand things over to today's featured speakers, I wanted the audience to know that Dan and Pete will be concluding today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback as well as additional information about this new research. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Dan Twing. Dan?
Thank you, Raleigh. And I'd like to start by thanking the sponsor of this research, Perforce, who helped us refine the survey and added a lot of good questions around AI in DevOps around testing. And so we're happy to have them join us in this and refine some of the goals that we had for the research. So I'm going to start with a real high-level summary of what we found. First, I want to say that, we did this research earlier in the year, and as fast as this is moving, there are half a dozen tools out now that weren't out when we conducted this research around different DevOps and coding aspects of AI applied here. So, this is moving quicker than you can keep up with in this thing, but we still had some good examples. It was early when we did this. The big findings are that, we found that adoption really is crossed out of the experimental phase for most people and into real use, and that is across dev, test, and DevSecOps. Really, there are gains and there are risks. Both are real. It absolutely accelerates delivery, but it also amplifies defects and vulnerabilities. And as we get into this, we'll talk a lot about that. So really the shift is, rather than coding it from the beginning, developers are really shifting into more review roles and debugging what is generated by the AI. It does save time, but, it's far from perfect. Security is the center of gravity here. It drives both adoption and constraints, and innovation. So in some ways, we're running out ahead a little bit. And this happens with a lot of new technologies where all of the governance stuff, all of the security stuff, these things oftentimes have to play catch up we have to even learn what those issues might be sometimes. So, we're in that phase where folks are kind of pushing the envelope, and in many ways, the security and the governance isn't keeping pace. And then, really that developer role is from producer to more validator and steward. And if you've used AI, even in, I've used it a fair amount in my writing and my research work, and yeah, it will shift what you do. And I started life as a developer. I haven't used these tools as a developer, but I can imagine, it's similar to using them in writing, which is, you get a lot fast. Most of it's good. You got to watch for the problems, and then you got to spend a lot more time reviewing and refining. And that's really been what we learned the experience was for the developers. So with this, Pete's going to dig into the first section here in detail, and we'll get to some of the underlying things that resulted in these key findings. Go ahead, Pete.
Thanks, Dan. So our survey results show that AI tools are becoming mainstream, but caution still prevails. Development teams clearly are buying into the AI tools, but they do have concerns. So as Dan mentioned, we're seeing solid adoption across all phases of development, but with guardrails. Perceived maturity is strong enough that teams are relying on AI in production. What only a few years ago was considered experimental is now becoming central to development. That's what we're seeing in these results. When asked how they rate their organization's maturity in AI augmented development, 65% say AI native development is the norm, or they have broad adoption in core workflows. In terms of the guardrails, there are clear concerns across the board, but the adoption is so strong that it is outpacing the governance and control a little bit, which Dan will delve into a little bit later. So let's go to the first chart here. As you can see on this chart, our survey shows 59% of organizations using one or more AI-powered development tools in production, and another 33% are experimenting with or piloting multiple tools. Virtually no organizations surveyed are not using or considering AI tools. Those are some pretty strong numbers considering where AI dev tools were a couple of years ago. We see high confidence in AI maturity. That's the chart on the right. 92% rate AI development tools as very or somewhat mature. Then when asked if AI is helpful, 80% see AI development tools as very helpful, and another 19% call them somewhat helpful. So that's basically all respondents when the two responses are combined. So these findings confirm AI tools are considered ready to take on a primary role in the software development cycle. Let's go to the next chart. Before I address this specific chart, I'll just tell you that 69% use AI for both code completion and generation, but 1 in 4 prohibit use in security sensitive code. So we believe this reflects a conscious trade-off. They take the efficiency gains where the risk is not too bad, but then they limit exposure in areas where the vulnerability carries what they consider an unacceptable cost. This further supports what I was saying earlier, that AI adoption is becoming mainstream, but it's not used indiscriminately. There's got to be guardrails. Now, seen on this chart, we see 58% have integrated AI tools into CI/CD pipelines, with an additional 33% planning to do so within the next 12 months. We also had found that 51% are using AI-powered testing tools in production, with another 40% experimenting or piloting. So these statistics clearly demonstrate that AI is no longer a novelty, but rather is becoming a defining element of the modern software tool chain. Mainstream, we're calling it becoming mainstream. It is definitely going in that direction. Let's go to the next slide. AI tools, they're accelerators, but they have a dual impact. They accelerate productivity and the risks at the same time. So according to the survey, AI provides measurable improvements in testing standards and efficiency, but it simultaneously presents new challenges that erode confidence in the code. This is especially evident in code quality and testing, where respondents they identified code quality and testing as both the greatest areas of improvement and the greatest sources of frustration. So there's a lesson in here. AI in development is not a plug and play productivity boost. It boosts both strengths and weaknesses depending on how it is managed. Without oversight, AI tools magnify defects as easily as they improve quality. So let's look at the first chart here. On the positive side, AI development tools are helping organizations reach quality levels that were difficult to achieve consistently before. As seen in this chart, top benefits reported include improved testing coverage, 56%, more consistent code formatting, 55%, and better adherence to coding standards, that's 53%. These results highlight one of AI's core strengths: applying rules and patterns at scale without fatigue or deviation. So for many organizations, this means baseline code quality can improve even as development cycles accelerate. So while the opposite happens within a traditional development process, and by traditional, I mean like not augmented by AI. Consistency in code formatting and standards also reduces downstream friction, making code easier to review, maintain, and integrate across teams. Now let's go to the next chart and look at the challenges. So the same survey data shows that organizations remain deeply cautious. They're balancing their enthusiasm for productivity gains with governance and restrictions. Enterprises seem to be aware that AI has the potential to accelerate delivery while simultaneously introducing risk. It's not a surprise to them. Security is the top concern about AI in development, followed closely by quality. So before I get into the chart here, which is about challenges experienced from the use of AI tools, I just want to talk a little bit about concerns organizations have about AI tools. The top concerns are security and privacy risks at 62%, and the possibility that AI generated code could introduce vulnerabilities, 52%. So security right at the top of the list there. Code defects and bugs caused by AI dev tools, 52%, code quality, 45%, and the possibility AI will not understand goals, 47%. So they're also causes for apprehension, and they're all representing the quality issue. Now, similarly, we're seeing the same thing on the chart here. The main challenges are security vulnerabilities, 50%, and code defects, 42%. We also found that a majority, 57%, described negative or neutral experiences from AI use. The primary driver of these negative experiences is inconsistency in code quality and testing. So the unhappiness here is more about the quality than the security, but the security issues likely come later and are no less negative. So back to concerns for a moment, we also asked about concerns about AI tools from the team perspective. And here the top issues were over reliance on AI outputs, 69%, and blind faith in results, 61%. So these findings highlight the dual threat. Vulnerabilities can enter the code base directly through flawed AI output or indirectly by developers overusing AI generated code or not being careful enough. So it's something to watch out for. Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Pete. I just want to say that almost every survey we do on almost any topic, security is always going to show up at the top. But I think here it is the potential for damage is potentially far greater. But security and governance concerns really show up in every survey. I mean, which is good because we've raised the level of that. Folks are thinking about that. But here we really have a lot of caution. So, as we said earlier, security is the center of gravity for AI and DevOps. It's really security risks really are dictating the adoption speed and the tool selection. And the one place where there's some governance involved, in most cases, it starts with security. And if they're doing any kind of tool review, they're ensuring that it meets security requirements. So it's really AI really amplifies the exposure, right, of generating unvetted code at scale. So the security reviews, which also are going to be automated, and folks are going to attempt to automate them, but the only way that you learn to trust that is to, go through the manual process as well and compare the results. And over time, you learn that it's believable. And then, you'll slowly accept the more automated answer around that. So some security reviews can be done with AI, but right now there's a lot of, attention here with the human attention as well. And governance and controls are really behind real world usage. So while security is somewhat the first point where there's some concern, across the board, really the use is out ahead of the controls. So one of the questions we asked is, which of the following DevSecOps capabilities does AI enhance today? And you can see, like several of the other questions we've had, there's pretty broad experimentation and adoption going on. Real-time reachability analysis, risk-based prioritization of vulnerabilities are the two at the top of the list. Looking at compliance enforcement, via policy as code. You got really over half of the market doing all of those top four things, including security by design, including like recommendations at prompt time. So, security is getting that attention, I think, but we're probably still, if we're on a scale of 1 to 10, this is just, my gut level. We're at about a 5 or a 6. 2-3 years out, you're going to see even more security reviews and compliance built in here. So learning curve, but lots of uses going on and lots of learning happening around, where are the vulnerabilities, and that's going to have to continue to mature. When we ask about governance policies currently in place, the security review being the most common at 67%, as I said on the prior slide, where everything is at, security's leading, but here we see only 2/3 are doing even security reviews, which means there's a third of the folks who are utilizing these tools in the early going and not doing that security review step. So while it's the most mature, again, we're at a 5 or a 6 out of 10 points, if you ask me, and there's room for improvement. The next big area, developer training requirements for AI usage. So before you're allowed to use AI for production, do you have to get some amount of training from the organization or from the vendors of the tools? We didn't clarify the type of training, but better than half, 55%, are requiring some basic upfront, ground setting on how and where you can use them. As Pete mentioned, there are areas that are, off limits in many enterprises. Use them at will, except leave this area alone, and specific security code being the most common. Formal policy restricting use of unauthorized tools. About half the organizations, just under half, have either a block list or an approved whitelist. You'll see that. So again, 2/3 are doing security reviews. Only half are even weighing in on which tools are appropriate or not appropriate. So still very much in the early going. And governance here is really materially lagging. So while security is at least at a level of, we're certainly giving it attention. Again, I think there will be more attention given going forward. There's a lot less around broader governance. So AI usage has really outpaced any kind of policy standardization and enforcement. Other than, like I said, about half are doing like a white list of these are the approved tools or these are the blocked tools, right? Some are taking one path, some are taking the other. But existing controls that focus on risk containment are there, but not lifecycle accountability. So the broader DevOps processes, there's probably a lot more governance that can be added in here over time. Shadow usage and informal approval patterns are really still persisting at scale. So you get a lot of that shadow IT, right? It's easy to go sign up for a tool if you're somebody with a corporate card, credit card, and the fees are under your limits. There's a lot of experimentation going on ahead of even making, more formal lifecycle type governance choices. So here's a question: who governs the use of AI tools in your organization? Right now, not surprising that IT security or AppSec are at the top of that list, given that most of the governance that we're seeing is happening in and around security. And then the next biggest group, of course, IT ops. But from what we've learned here, the bulk of that still focused on security and app security specifically. DevOps or platform engineering at 61% is the next biggest area, and enforcing, probably some of the change control aspects of DevOps. And then there's a lot of AI use around platform engineering and systems resource engineering, or SREs. A lot of things are being automated with AI around that, infrastructure config and monitoring and adjustments. We have, just 38% have legal or compliance governance, and architectural or engineering leadership, about a third of organizations. So this really backs up that comment that, security is where the focus has been. And the farther you move from security to other areas where we have governance, in more mature aspects of IT, those are where we're lacking here currently. Although, again, I think if we refresh this in 12 months, we're going to see a lot of the governance will have matured over that time. So what controls are in place to enforce responsible tool use? So we're moving away from just tools or topics of governance and specific kinds of activities. So you've got 2/3 that have, approval workflows or monitoring of tool usage. Those controls are in place. And then slightly less, but still the majority have integrated usage audit logs, role-based access controls, or centralized procurement or tool vetting. So again, about 50% are controlling the tools available and about 50% are not. We believe that broader lifecycle governance is definitely going to mature over time. It's just early. So with that, I think, Pete, you're going to talk about this next section.
Yes. So I would say the most profound finding of the report is the redefined developer role. This is not a surprise. Many people are talking about it, but our survey results prove it. This shift marks a decisive change in how developers are valued. Rather than trying to generate the most code, developers must ensure that what the AI generates is accurate, secure, and aligned with standards and policies. So we think these findings underscore the need to prepare development teams for this evolving role. Training, governance, and team structures must evolve to support the developers' expanded oversight responsibilities. Metrics for productivity must also shift, focusing less on volume and more on quality, security, and validation. The organizations that make these changes will be best positioned to harness AI for the positive results while avoiding the downside that I was talking about earlier. Let's look at the chart and dig into some of the numbers. They show that what I was just talking about, the survey shows that 57% of developers are spending more time on code review and quality oversight. 53% are taking on expanded security responsibilities, and 52% are dedicating more effort to validating AI generated output. So, I mean, you can see the developer's role transforming before your eyes when you look at these stats. And the clincher, we found that 45% spend less time writing code or scripts manually. Um, the role shift is decisive. Developers are moving from being primary code producers to overseeing quality and security. And this is only going to keep going in this direction. The skills that define the developer of the future will be rooted in oversight and judgment rather than sheer coding output. Now, Dan has some findings, additional findings on the future of AI and dev.
Yeah, so where in the DevOps life cycle are AI-powered tools currently in use, right? We see that testing actually is out front. Again, being that the review role is so much greater for those that are generating, the code out of the AI. Whether it's generated by a human or AI, the testing function is, quite similar at several levels. And automating that testing is leading with code generation just a few points behind that. This question gets a bit broader than just AI dev because obviously there's this IT ops monitoring role. For years, you've heard, talk of AI ops or AI assisted operations. That's bleeding in here a little bit because the idea that you can watch and trend these things is also beneficial to the dev teams. So we see, monitoring as high on the list. We see operations and deployment. We know these have been automated a lot anyway, just through more traditional tools. The opportunity to further that through the AI is being used pretty heavily. Integration and planning, and with fewer, actually only 34%. So we sort of see that 1/3, 2/3 kind of grouping in a lot of this stuff. And on the delivery side, we just see that about 1/3 of the market actually pushing all the way to final delivery of code. So again, we expect that this will continue to mature over time. And in fact, one area, a tool that I learned about at IBM Tech Exchange in October, earlier this year, months after we did this study, IBM brought forward an integration of Turbonomic and Concert and Instana. So they took their observability and their performance enhancing, analysis tool, put them in one AI. And what's interesting is it's really focused on the SRE role And governance is a big, and audit trail is a big part of what they're trying to do in that product. So even since we did this survey, there's been pretty big leaps forward around that compliance or audit trail kind of focus. And I think many of the tools that have emerged since we first did this survey have had that heavier focus on that sort of oversight. And I think, that just reinforces what we said about, it's early and things are going to mature. Even since we did this survey, in the few months since we did that, there's been a lot of new things that have emerged in that vein of governance and audit and control. So we're really entering this second phase, from assistance to autonomy. If you kind of take a step back and think about how this is progressing, we think expansion is going to continue beyond coding into more of, the pipeline around, how we're bringing, CI/CD forward, testing, operations. It's all going to get more and more AI'd up over time. And in fashion of many kinds of new tech, often we're going to be running out ahead of the ultimate best practices and governances because we have to figure out as we go. So growth's going to be conditional, allowed only where those guardrails exist, but it leaks through, right? The only way, the more risk reward oriented organizations are going to press ahead first. They're going to learn some lessons. They're going to make some adjustments. Others will learn from that. But the bulk of the market is going to wait on guardrails, at least at that security level, before they move forward. And then the next wave really shifts from triggered assistance to delegated execution, right? In other words, instead of me asking for help and you giving me help, I'm going to just start to hand off to the AI more and more. Whether it's dev, it'll be more scaffolding, but you fill in the blanks. If it's operations, bring the exceptions to me, handle the normalcy without my, need to be involved. All of that is going to move in that more delegated fashion. So, we also asked, in which area do you want AI DevOps to go next? So, as Pete said, we've seen the developer role change a lot on the generation side. We've seen a lot of uptick in testing. There's a lot of interest in automating that SRE function. Where next? So the biggest is further CI/CD automation. Almost equal to that, just a point behind, is AI autonomy and agentic capabilities. So we hadn't talked a lot about agentic AI here, but really it's a form of an application that has a specific purpose. You tend to see the functions defined to a lower point, so it's a very refined piece of work or outcome. And then multiple agents get linked together to achieve that. So at this stage, we're seeing a lot of code assistance tools, but we haven't seen that full agentic capability to take, and run with multiple steps, maybe not just code generation, but do the generation, then do the code review, then give me the report back. So that first review point could move deeper into the process. That's one thing I would expect to see as these tools increase. Another area of desire is around incident detection. And even though security and compliance are there, almost 10% want to see further work around security and compliance. So, and then you can see the list sort of drops off from there. Further on code quality and testing. What's interesting is those top 5 are the areas where we are already seeing the most effort. So one way to look at this list is do the things you're already doing even better with more maturity before we think about what comes after that, like predictive analytics or cost optimization, work around. And there's a lot of AI being used to modernize legacy systems. And perhaps that's lower on the list here because we already see a lot of those tools out there. But the focus is at the top of this chart. And what's interesting is that's where the bulk of the current capabilities exist. This just speaks even louder to we aren't all the way there on that yet. And then when we get to where do you see the greatest opportunity for it to support platform engineering specifically? Because as I said, this SRE role seems to be one of the biggest targets for the most automation in the early going here, moving from just assistance tools to that full AI autonomy with agentic capabilities to really function, around, don't just be aware of a problem, help us understand the root cause, what is the fix, and ultimately, the AI will not just recommend the fix to a human, but we will slowly learn to trust it more, and we will start to give it more autonomy, and it will actually take corrective actions on its own and play the role of that human SRE. So that's probably one of the first places that are going to mature fastest. And as I said, that IBM capability that came out, a few months after we did this research shows the momentum around that. Cost optimization and efficiency is the next big one. Think about this. If, cloud costs are hard to control anyway, and with a human SRE, you're often focused first on the pressure point to find the root cause, fix it, get things running smoothly again, right? If it's that kind of issue. Or if you're in the deployment phase, find the right architecture that's going to meet the SLAs, the right config, without costing us too much, right? Well, this is an area where it's expected that AI is going to be able to add a lot of value to bring that other angle into the fore as these decisions are being made. So there's high hope that as we agentic AI up the actual SRE function, we can bring a lot of cost information and planning and knowledge to those choices around configuration to better manage costs. And that's a level that, as a human, it's harder to keep all of those parameters in mind. And, you're most focused on getting the resolution and moving forward, and cost might become secondary. While with the AI, we can dial that right into the right level of importance and priority. And then from there, customer support and experience is one of the next big areas. I mean, that other category, too many things in there. None of them, they're all less than 2%, or they'd be on this chart. So there's a lot of ideas in the early going, but that customer support and experience is a big one. So really, we're seeing folks move beyond incremental efficiency and move more and more towards more autonomy, letting the AI do more things, itself, and a lot of these tools have sort of a continuum or a slider bar, right? On one end, ask a human for everything. So do the work to figure out the recommendation to move forward. Ask me if we're going to do that or not. And beyond that, on the other end of the spectrum, it is full autonomy. Find the problem and, implement the fix and just tell me what you did, or ask me the basic questions about this app and then go build it, front to back, and then show me your review and testing results, right? So the idea that more and more autonomy will come as we get more experience, we learn to trust it more. There'll be a lot of steps in between the two ends of that continuum as we let AI have more and more freedom as we build more and more trust. So with that, before we get to the Q&A, I'd just like to take a moment and let you all know about two other places where you can hear from Pete or I. I do a podcast on enterprise automation called the Enterprise Automation Excellence Podcast. We do that about every 2 weeks. I have a co-host, Tom O'Rourke, with me, and we cover a lot of things around workload automation and broader IT automation, the impact of agentic AI, and so on. And actually, some of these DevOps tools do make our conversation from time to time. And I think Pete's going to join us for an episode, and we're going to talk more about this survey and these results in relation to broader automation in an upcoming episode. So watch for that. And then Pete, I'll let you talk about DevOps Digest real quick, because I think that's very relevant here as well.
Sure. DevOps Digest is a IT community blog. Vendors, analysts, consultants can all come to the site and blog on the site. Topics are a broad range of DevOps related topics and development. And we covered AI development tools a lot. We even had a big series about where this is going. So check us out every day. Every weekday we post some new products, and we also we post the Cybersecurity Awesomeness podcast, which is an EMA podcast on the site. So check it out.
Great. Thanks, Pete. And with that, we're going to turn it back to Raleigh to take us through the Q&A.
Thanks, Pete and Dan. Before I jump into the questions, I wanted the audience to learn more about this new research report. You can access it for free on the Perforce website, so I encourage you to do that. It is also on the EMA website. Pete, starting with you, let's jump into the questions. Will AI ultimately replace developers?
So that's the big question. You hear this debate going on all the time. I say not in the foreseeable future. I think that's the industry consensus, and I think our survey stats support that idea. Due to the need for governance, which the survey results show, I think we're always going to need that oversight. So like what I was talking about before, the redefined developer role, the developer's responsibilities will continue to evolve as AI takes on more autonomy, which I think you will see over time as trust builds. But I just don't foresee any time soon where you won't need someone overseeing the process. We can debate about whether you call this new role of AI development oversight an actual developer, but they still have to have similar skills. So in conclusion, I would say no, AI will not replace developers even down the line.
Thanks, Pete. Dan, jumping over to you, how should enterprises think about responsibly scaling AI and DevOps?
Everybody's got their own risk profile, right? How much risk they're willing to take. If you're more risk adverse, you're probably going to wait for more maturity around these things, as you're probably going to be living in that 30% who are not actively experimenting and living with good guidance on security, not fully mature, and other areas still getting sorted out, right? I think the most successful organizations are going to see AI and DevOps more as a capability to augment that engineering judgment, not replace it. So that almost dovetails to what Pete just said, that our developer's going to go away. No, the reality there, I think, is that the role's going to shift, and that may shift the amount of code that can be generated from the same amount of folks. But I think that if they're going to do it responsibly, they need to start with a well-defined use cases, right? Like, where is it allowed and where is it not? I think you want to be one of those organizations that at a minimum is vetting some number of tools to whitelist, and it may not be one of each type. You may allow experimentation in 2 or 3 of each type, but a basic tool review and giving some guidance to what is allowed to be experimented with, for production, what isn't, or be aware that, this can happen without your knowledge through shadow IT. So, being completely silent about this is probably not a good idea. You need to at least give your teams, your dev teams, some guidance, right? What is our stance? What are you allowed to do in experimentation that doesn't make its way to governance? If you do use it, what reviews are required? Whatever your stance is, communicate it. And having no stance right now is probably a huge mistake, because whether you're pushing your dev teams to use these tools or not, they're getting exposed to it. They're curious. And if you don't think they're using it because you've got no policy, you're probably very wrong. So, have an opinion, put in some basic guardrails, and monitor how it's progressing. That would probably be my biggest advice.
Great insights. Thanks, Dan. Pete, jumping back over to you, do you think AI is making developers and development teams more or less mature?
So I could see the argument that by doing a lot of the work that developers traditionally do, AI doing that work, someone could say that it slows down the developer's own skill development. But I think it actually makes the teams more mature because we had an interesting insight from the survey. Almost half of the respondents are working more closely with product teams and the business side of their organizations on outcomes. So, in my opinion, this signifies a move towards a more mature development group, more mature business focused approach. Sharing a strategic vision with other departments in the organization and aligning with the high level business objectives.
Thanks, Pete. And did the survey uncover anything interesting about vibe coding?
Yes, we asked about vibe coding using conversational code interfaces. 38% see it as a valuable addition, and 33% believe it is a helpful bridge for onboarding new developers. Then we found that 20% say it's useful for business users, but less relevant for developers. But only 3% said it was highly disruptive, that it's going to reshape developer workflows. So there's kind of mixed emotions here. They see it as helpful, but it doesn't seem to be transformational at this point.
Thanks, Pete. Let's take one final question, concluding with you, Dan. Were there any surprising results from the survey?
Yeah, a couple of things stood out. First, AI isn't a fringe experiment anymore, right? You heard Pete use the phrasing earlier, mainstreamed. We've seen that, on many of these fronts, we're seeing, from 55 to 60%, upwards of 70%, doing many of these things. So, nearly 2/3 to just a little over 2/3 are quite active with these tools. So it's not just mainstream. And a lot of folks that saw these results at first, I think, were, it's too early to have this broad of adoption. I'm not sure I believe these results, but don't forget that, depending on how much review is involved, it's not like they're just turning over code dev to an AI and then pushing it to production, right? We saw that the developer role that's evolving is to one of more review and more of that unit test layer and less time spent actually generating the code. So just because there's broad use of this does not mean that the risk has gone up if they're reviewing the code correctly, right? Even if they don't have a lot of the other guardrails in place, the normal, level of testing before something goes to production should be sufficient regardless of how the code was generated. So the numbers might seem big, but there's a lot of review, I think, that goes with that at this point. Second really was organizations believe they're more productive with AI, but they haven't modernized their governance practices, right? So I guess it was a little surprising that we are so far out there and that the governance side is lagging as much as it is. But again, we did this pretty early. Pete had run that series on DevOpsdigest on these tools, and we were excited by some of the interactions he was having there, and this topic came up. But we're really early, as far as I know, we're one of the first to do something on this topic. And so we're seeing a lot of the results reflect that early stage. But even at that, I guess I didn't expect governance to trail use quite as much as we're seeing. But even in the last few months, I've witnessed the IBM example being one with around Instano and Turbonomic, that there are a lot of efforts being brought forward to raise those guardrails. So, bit surprising we're out that far. Not a surprise ultimately that, it will play catch up. And it could take a while for that to happen. But, I guess that big surprise, really, these numbers look like more adoption than a lot of folks really expected. And for me, you have to take that step back and go, yes, but they're doing so with a lot of caution and review at this point.
Great insights, Dan and Pete. Thank you. And thanks to the audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's event. So I hope you'll check that email out. And I hope we will see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.